Tonight, once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Pride, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? I'm Daniel. This is the Drunk Turkey Show. Today we have a good show for you guys. I think, we're going to have a fan favorite, guest of the show. He's always welcome here. His name is Crime Time from the True Crime Time YouTube channel. What's going on, Crime Time?
Hey, how's it going, Daniel? Thanks for having me. Hey, everybody.
Oh, thank you, man, for joining. I it's been a long week, so forgive me if I sound a little tired. I'm gonna push through, but it's been an extremely long week. I think I've had a podcast every single day this week. It's
busy.
Very busy. A lot of it was on my Steelers stuff. So if you guys are fans of the NFL or fans of the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially, I'm on a couple of other YouTube channels. One called State of the Steelers, another one called Steel Curtain Network. I'm live on Steel Curtain Network every Monday about 8:30 p.m. Central Time. So if you're in the PA area and you want to hear about some good football talk, make sure you go check it out. Just kind of have to bump that up here and there, right? So, since the last time we spoke, there's been, I don't want to say like a lot of news or anything like that, but there's been a large document dropped, and it's all in favor of Bryan Kohberger having a change of venue. Now, me personally, I've not been opposed to the change of venue in the past, but talking to Howard Bloom, and he's probably got a lot more experience in covering, death penalty type cases, that a change of venue usually just kind of prolongs things. And this case this trial has been prolonged so long. Yeah. I just that's the only motive that I have for it not going through. If they can guarantee that it'll still go on in, June of 2026, then I don't care. What are your thoughts on the change of venue?
Well, I think it's interesting that they're requesting a change of venue because they're saying the jury pool could be biased. And essentially what they're doing is they're asking for a larger jury pool by moving it down to Boise, right? So they're wanting a larger population to kind of pull from, who they're claiming will be, less bias or having more options will allow them when they bring everybody in to select the jury, it'll give them more options. But I find it interesting that they're doing this, after their poll of the population in Moscow. So in their filing, they explain that, 70% of the people that they polled thought Bryan Kohberger was guilty, and 51% of those people felt that they wouldn't change their mind. So the defense is very aware that jury pool is, going to probably have people out there who think he's guilty at this point. So I just think it's interesting that now they're trying to, relocate out of there. What I'd like to know is, are they going to do the same polling in Ada County before they move down to Boise to get the same thing, right? It's, you know what I mean? You could do the same thing and pull another county and say, well, what do you guys know? Did they do that? So really what they're doing is they're going after a larger group of people to summon the jury from. I think it's going to come down to the evidence, so I don't think it's necessarily going to make a difference. And I agree with you. It's another tactic the defense is using, right, in exhausting kind of every angle they have in the defense of Bryan.
Right. And Yeah, and I get it. You know, it's a tactic, and the purpose behind it is, you know, things happen, people forget, people don't want to be involved, stuff like that. So, you know, it's typically a tactic not really done by somebody who is, you know, innocent of something. It's usually a tactic done to somebody who is trying to get away with something. Now, that's just
Oh,
my
yeah.
opinion, but to me, that's just how I see things. You know, if you're having to wait for people to forget things or
Well,
something to happen, then that's
well,
I
look
don't
at
know.
the
Scream innocence to me.
alibi filing, right? Similar tactic. It was another way for them to, you know, kind of take another angle with the defense, introduce Cyray, right? A defense witness, kind of get him in there. So again, they're going after every angle. Now, we haven't heard anything else about the alibi since, have we? So it's, you know, it's interesting that they're not more focused on that and proving his innocence. Like you said, what they're doing is they're defending him from the perspective, anyway, you know, from us looking in, as if he's guilty. I'm not getting the feeling that they're defending an innocent person. I feel like they're defending somebody who's guilty based off of their strategy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would agree with you on that. What does kind of, I mean, it's not so much, it just seems like a weird thing to do, to go to Boise. You know, I was listening to, I think it's Nancy Grace, and she was talking about the subject with, I think it was, I can't think of his name. He's on the Interview Room. Chris McDougall. I can't. I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing his last name. I know I'm messing it up. He mentioned that Boise was called the Blue Dot, mainly because there was a lot of like retired police officers and law enforcement officers in that area. That, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good move to make. I think they wasn't Chad Daybell also tried out there in Boise?
Was he? Okay.
I think he was.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I think he was. Correct me in the live chat. I know you guys will. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, and I don't know how many counties there are in Idaho that they could move it to. You know, again, with their angle here being, they feel that this is a small population in Latah County of, I think they said 25,000 people. I'll have to look into how many counties out there have larger populations.
Well, Boise does. I mean, I think they put it around 40,000 or 50,000 people in Moscow, and Boise having somewhere around 500,000. So it was like a huge difference in the amount of people that they can pull. I think the other thing too is that Boise being a larger city, there's more of the likelihood you might get somebody who doesn't, you know, perhaps is a little bit more liberal, right? And perhaps doesn't really believe in like the death penalty and things. And so they could maybe save his life in that type of situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. I've brought up on some of my lives the idea that I feel like the defense is kind of focused on the death penalty piece. And I think there's two strategies. Obviously, they want to try to prove him innocent or get him acquitted. But I think the other strategy going on is saving his life, right? And trying to get rid of the death penalty. And to your point, if they go somewhere where they feel the population is, you know, the people who are deciding that will not do that, then that's going to help on that front as well. Not knowing what the evidence is, I sometimes I even wonder if that's their main focus is just trying to find a way to get around the death penalty. If they've seen enough evidence and they kind of know what they're bringing to the table from the defense side, some of their actions makes me feel like they're actually very focused on trying to get rid of the death penalty. Sometimes I wonder if they're going to concede the guilt side if they can find a way to get him out of that.
All right. Right. And I understand. I thought maybe perhaps, you know, Moscow would have been maybe, I get it. There's probably a lot of people that think he's guilty there too, but there's a lot of people there that don't necessarily trust the police. And a lot of them have to do with the Christ Church in that area. Howard Bloom spoke with many of the church attendees and including their, I think it's a preacher, pastor. And, you know, I think it was his grandson that was involved in the sticker gate, which resulted in a couple of officers lying about, a camera or an audio and things of that nature. And so they don't trust the police there. Now, in my opinion, you also have the majority of the people that are living in Moscow. They're the ones that go to the university. Now, I understand that there's probably a university out there in Boise as well, but that population isn't overrun by the university. Like Moscow's population is overran by the population from the university, meaning that you're probably more likely to get, a younger person who, maybe perhaps is iffy on things, and or one of these, Church Christ members who maybe perhaps don't really trust the police. I think by moving it to Boise might end up being a bad situation for him. And I think he's made a lot of bad mistakes, to be honest with you. I think the defense has made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, it's hard to say with, kind of not having insight into everything, right? Everything being redacted and things like that makes it really challenging to kind of figure out what they're doing. But, with this company they used, you'd mentioned kind of the demographics of the population, and they used a company, I believe it's called TrueScope, to conduct this survey of the people and kind of come to this conclusion that they feel it needs to be moved. But I'm wondering what other research, what other, things they looked into demographically in other areas. Maybe there's a reason they want to move it down there. Some of the reasons you pointed out, I think, just kind of that change in population. But they do have some insights into that. It's to me, the time is. I'm very interested to see what the judge is going to say here, because I've never heard of a defense, and maybe it happens all the time, I don't know, of a defense actually polling the population to get a pulse of innocence or guilt before requesting the change of venue. I don't know if that happens often or if this is kind of a new thing.
Well, no, change of venue is typically something that is asked for in a lot of cases, especially those that have any media attention, even if it's like a lot of local media attention. So it's because the problem is in that local area. This is the area tainted. So this case here is worldwide. So I don't know. I understand, the meaning behind it and the purpose behind it. It's just, and when I meant also by mistakes, I didn't talk about the things that we don't know. I'm talking about the things that we do know. When Bryan Kohberger decided to waive his, speedy trial, had he done his speedy trial thing, at that time there was 3 unknown DNAs. Now we heard it a couple of trials ago. The prosecution, the female, I don't remember her name off the top of my head. She had mentioned that they had done more DNA work on other profiles at the request of the defense. So I can only assume that since those were the DNAs samples that they brought up as being the 3 male unknown DNAs, and that the prosecution are doing it, and they now give them the opportunity to go and figure out who those DNAs are and see if they have alibis to cross them off the list. So had he gone to trial in the beginning, they wouldn't have had time to go and find these unknown DNA samples. You get what I'm saying? They wouldn't have been able to find it. It would have taken them a little bit longer and all those things. And there's other things that who knows what has been found since his arrest, right? Like I've heard, and, Nancy Grace talked about it today with more certainty, saying that she knew that prosecution or law enforcement found the receipt from Amazon for the K-bar knife and sheath. When did they find it? I believe it wasn't under the first search that they went and looking for it, because if they did that, I think they would have came up under Bryan Kohberger's name pretty quickly and made the connection of where he lived. And maybe even if they threw in his name in the database, since they had pulled him over a couple of times, he would have came up, in the police records right away. And so then, connecting those dots would have been quickly. So he must have bought those items off of Amazon by another means, whether it be through a friend or a fake profile, maybe a gift card. I think it's
possible he even purchased it through his parents' Amazon account.
Maybe. I mean, if that ends up being the case, and they say, all right, Michael Kohberger, and then they go and say, all right, let's put in just the last name in our search history, Kohberger, because that's where it's going to start. You always start at the last name. It's going to bring up those with that last name who have been, contacted with, whether it was by citation, warning, or whatever the case may have been. And his name would have came up. Those connecting dots would have been really, really fast. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, since it wasn't in the probable cause affidavit, they didn't know that before his arrest.
Agree.
So would they have figured that out, had he not waived his right for speedy trial? Maybe not. And, here recently, the prosecution or the defense have been asking for stuff still. Now they have most of it. They had Cy Ray's testimony, and imagine, a lot of people looked at that and thought it was powerful or whatever. The way he explains things, it did seem like it was in the benefit of the defense. However, when you actually break down what he says is missing, it doesn't make sense why it should be there. When he says that there's not the drive test between Pullman and Moscow. Well, according to the probable cause affidavit, Bryan Kohberger had turned off his phone while in Pullman. So if you go and get a test drive from Moscow to Pullman to see how the phone acts and how it connects to different towers, what are you going to compare it to if he didn't have his phone on during that time or wasn't connected to the towers? And then you look at the King Road residence, because that's what the other argument that he had was that there was no data from inside the residence. And so, prosecution doesn't say he had his phone inside the residence. So why would they need to, see how his phone would have worked inside that house if they don't know or believe that his phone was ever on inside that house? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And those are things that you don't have to know those things to prove somebody's guilt. Those are things that were used in the investigation and in the acquisition of the PCA in order to get the warrants that they needed. That doesn't mean that that's what they're going to come to court with and tell the story of, right? So the prosecution's going to have a theory on how this happened. Their theory doesn't have to be perfect. They don't have to have it down to every detail on what he did and what color shirt he was wearing, and right. So there's what the defense is trying to do is they like to try to get ahead of the evidence and get it not admissible. So when you're talking about things like the DNA, they've got to get ahead of that. And so what they do is they want to attack the PCA, and they're trying to show that there was a malicious manipulation of information and evidence in order to kind of set up, Bryan to kind of get what they want done with Bryan Kohberger, and that they actually kind of went another route in identifying him, to your point, right? They're not sure when he was identified. And so I think that there's this game that goes on, right? It's going to, the knife sheath is the nail in the coffin with the DNA. If they can't explain that away, they're in trouble. So they've got to figure out a way to either get that not admissible or, get an expert or something that can dispute it. But so when they go after things like the PCA, they're going after the case in general. If they can attack breakdowns in the case, that's grounds for things like mistrials and things like that, right? And violations of his rights. And so if they can find something in there, the DNA is irrelevant, right? So that's a tactic they use in order to attack very strong evidence. Is if you can get ahead of it in the process, everything after that, if they violated something, is gone, right? So
yeah, I mean, you're right. And the DNA obviously is going to be, like you said, the nail in the coffin. And, somebody mentioned here, let me pull it up. And I think it's a good transition into it. It's a good question is, the defense has 3, possibly 4 witnesses listed on the defense thoughts. Those witnesses probably are Cy Ray and, any other expert that they're going to try to get to combat the evidence. I don't think he's going to have a witness that's going to say he was at one place or another, because that would have been tied to his alibi that should have been in by now. You get what I'm saying? So those witnesses are probably just experts, if I had to take a guess.
maybe a character. I haven't heard of any character witnesses, but possibly. And if it's just 3 or 4, that's concerning. I would hope that if I were in this situation, I'd have more than 3 or 4 people willing to be a character witness for me. You know what I mean? So,
Well, it didn't sound like he had a long list of friends.
right.
So, not saying that he was, anti-friend or whatever the case may have been. It didn't appear that he had a long list of friends. And
or not even friends, though, even people just kind of coming out and vouching for him. You didn't have anybody coming forward and going, anybody that I've seen that said, oh yeah, he's a normal guy to me, just
there has been,
good guy. I haven't really seen much of that. I mean, I've seen a little bit of like, from when he was younger, but the recent people that he interacted with, that they talked to, the students and things, they all kind of had the same theme as to his personality. And they said he was likable and friendly and talkative and things, but he was also strange to the point where they weren't hanging out with him, right? They weren't really close with him. And so when I say character witness, somebody that's going to come to the trial and kind of say, no, there's no way he could have done this, right? Not say, yeah, he was a little bit strange.
Right. There's been one person though that I can say came out on a podcast that they held her identity, but they called her Casey or Cassie, one of the two. And she said that he didn't seem weird or anything like that before the murders. Mm-hmm. After the murders, she said that, his grades, he was grading people differently. And that I believe she said something about his appearance, scruffy and stuff like that. But he never, I guess they had a discussion on the case. He didn't talk about it. But what she also mentioned was that he was just kind of in their class of 300. There was a lot of people in that class. And he was, I guess, the TA by himself, and that she would stare at him and things like that. And that he was very quiet. And, she didn't experience some of the things that she had heard, before Bryan Kohberger's arrest.
But would she come to trial and testify on his behalf?
Probably not, and I don't think that if somebody saw him as a normal person, it's not something that you're probably going to find a lot of people that think he's just a normal person just by meeting him or talking to him for the first time, things like that. I don't think gives off that, weird vibe. And from the sounds of it, it doesn't seem like most people that got that vibe got it initially. It was kind of after talking to him for a bit or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, I forgot where I was going with that. What'd you say?
Oh, we were just talking about the character witnesses and just kind of being willing to speak up for Bryan and the witness list in general being about 3 or 4 people. Now I don't know if I think it was True Blonde who had that question. I'm not sure if she was referring to that being the upcoming hearing where they do have 3 or 4 experts noted there that they're going to have talk about the change of venue. I think one of those people is the head of that research company that they've hired. So he'll be talking about the data and the polling that they did of the population, which again is still strange to me that a defense team can kind of poll the population to get a feel for the opinion out there and then kind of take the action of requesting it be moved. Again, if anybody knows about, put that in the comments. If anybody knows the answer to that, if that's a common thing that defense teams will actually hire a marketing team to go out and research and they monitor social media. They do all kinds of market research to get a feel for, kind of what's going on out there socially. And it's just, that's new to me in a defense of somebody.
Right.
I get the argument of the media coverage and especially when they were talking about Chief Fry running for sheriff and the impact, with that and the population. And I get what they're saying. I think it's going to come down to the judge there. That's why we have a judge, so he can kind of look at this and determine if it's a valid argument or not. It is challenging to get those change of venues to happen. So they're going to have to prove it. And that's where this marketing expert's going to come in and kind of vouch for that data.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think that's exactly what those witnesses are going to be, those experts that are going to be trying to, you know, one way or another, I think it's for the change of venue, discuss why it should be moved. And, at the end of the day, I think it's probably going to get moved. I think it's more than likely that it's going to get moved than it's not.
Yeah.
And, it's just kind of unfortunate.
They have a strong argument. But I do feel like Judge has been holding the defense to things. And so the other option is, if they don't move it, is they can expand, they can keep the trial in Latah County, and they can expand the jury pool, and pull in a larger amount of people. So they don't necessarily have to change the venue to increase the jury pool.
Yeah. Yeah. And, for me, I was, like I said, I never was opposed to the change of venue. I thought that if he's guilty, he's going to be guilty in Moscow. He's going to be guilty in Boise or wherever. My only argument against it is the stalling aspect. Like, is this going to move the trial back? And if it doesn't, if they're still able to go June 2025 or July 2025, then I'm not opposed to the move. I think they have a lot of evidence against this man.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think it'll be too difficult. Warning Labels asks, thoughts on the USB drive? I'm assuming it's the one that the police have, with all the cameras and all the other stuff that Ann Taylor was asking for. Did you catch that on that last hearing?
I did. Yeah, I'm just trying to think, kind of wrap my mind around the question there. Thoughts on it.
Well, one, do you think that it's law enforcement or the prosecution's job to, categorize those type of things, or is that the job of the defense? I mean, she's getting paid pretty well to do this.
Yeah, I think depending on what it is, I think as far as being reasonable with things, yeah. If now the prosecution and law enforcement is not going to be required to build the defense and kind of put together the evidence in that area, but I think if the defense comes there with a request, they should accommodate that, to the best of their ability. But I do think there's a line that you have to draw on how much they're going to do. So it's hard to say without knowing what the specific requests were. What are they actually asking for them to do? At the end of that hearing, it did sound like a lot of these requests had been fulfilled as well. So
yeah, what they were, I think, requesting were some cameras from a couple of different places. However, it was more of the spectacle. Sorry about that. They were making this trying to make this seem big and mysterious, right? They're like,
Red Star.
Yeah, we didn't get that one, or we didn't get any cameras that were leading out of Moscow on 95. And come to find out, even the judge said, one or two of those were broken, or whatever the case may have been. And what she's trying to do is put out this narrative out there that the police aren't doing the right thing, or they're this shady, group or whatever. And that's not really the case, because when you look at one of the locations that she had mentioned, there's a bank on one side of that business, and then a gas station on the other side. And I believe it was the coffee shop. That one's a little bit further back, so away from the street. So those other two cameras were in better position to capture the same thing. So there was no point.
Yeah. There's also another camera at the intersection right there. The city has a camera that, takes some images. I think they're still shots.
They do, but they didn't get to them in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. They said they were, they only hold it for so long, a certain amount of time. Yep.
Yeah, by the time that they figured out where it was at on the Windy app or windy.com or whatever it was, that's when they will do the deal there.
Well, and even Cy Ray admitted in his testimony regarding this, the missing cell phone data, and they had also brought up the missing camera footage. But he even said, well, there's things in there that could be exculpatory, but I reserve the right to change my mind once I see it. Right. So he never really said anything. he didn't say one way or the other. He just kind of got up there and said it could be, but I could change my mind. So it could also not be, so.
True.
Yeah, so that missing footage, when I think there was the one also south, I can't remember the name of the highway, but there's that other company.
Yeah, I-95. There was a construction company or something like that.
Yeah, same thing with that one. Just because he's not captured there going a certain route, back to the PCA description of the route he took, they're attacking that PCA and saying, well, where's this footage? Or did you capture a white Elantra anywhere here? And they said no. Still, you don't have to prove that he was in a certain spot at that exact time right there.
Well, what Payne said, or I think it was Payne, is that there's multiple ways to get to where he was, where his phone activated or got connected to the network. That his phone didn't connect until he was close to Genesee. Mm-hmm. And that basically there's a different route. In fact, I went through Google Maps. I think I put it on one of these shows not too long ago, and I went down this entire road to see when, in fact, I would get, in front of a camera, and I got all the way to Unionton, Washington before I came across a camera on those highways. So if obviously, well, let's think about this rationally and logically. If a guy who's an architect like Rex Humerman, who's really, expertise isn't criminal justice or things like that, if he did recon on cameras and things of that nature, I would suspect somebody who is trained to find those things, right? Because as an officer forensically, you go through cameras and things of that nature, you try to find suspects. You would assume that he probably would have done the same thing. And
it makes sense. We assumed for a long time that PCA description, right, was the route, and then it kind of became more clear as we learned more about the data that we had that it's not necessarily the route. That was an estimate that he could have taken, and then now it turns out maybe he did take another route, and to your point, it was more rural, and that kind of goes back to the angle of his planning and the mistakes he's made. And some people have asked, why would he do this and drive by a camera? Maybe he did do recon, right? Like you're saying, and he did do more planning than we thought. And, because we were assuming if he went this certain route, he would have been caught all over the place. So he might have been more tactful with that. But again, that doesn't mean that the prosecution has to come to that trial and prove the route he took, right? They don't have to prove that. Mm-hmm. There could be other evidence we haven't heard about tying him to the victims. And so if you have other things, the things like even the camera footage, the cell phone data, obviously the genealogy that they used, those things were kind of more early on in the case that they needed to get to the point where they are now. Once they got those warrants and they were able to do those data searches and get his DNA, who knows what they found. I'm pretty sure that he was following them online. They've said he wasn't stalking them, which is a completely different thing, but I've also heard he's, been following them. And I the other thing that I think is, I don't necessarily think that they were the only people that he was following online. There's sororities all over that area, and it's possible that he had multiple groups of people that he was following, and I'm in the opinion that he kind of had his eye on that whole Greek Row area, being a college student himself in a new area, having interest and curiosity about what's going on there. And I think he would have been looking into things. So it would not surprise me if he was following the victims as well as other students around the area. Right.
No, and I don't, me personally, I don't think he was following them online. It didn't fit my, I guess, profile of this man. If he got away with this, if he was following them on any social media or had contacted them on any social media, I've been saying this since the word go, they would have caught on to him pretty quick. They would have seen his name. They would have ran his name into the system. They would have seen that he had a white Elantra. Right. And they would have seen that it was a Pennsylvania plates at that time. And they would have been able to tie the fact that the Pennsylvania plates don't need the front license plates. and the ball would have gotten rolling real quick. You know, what a lot of folks don't realize is that, you know, Payne didn't get Bryan Kohberger's name until evening or afternoon of December 19th. They still needed to find Kohberger. They found him, I think it was the 24th or so. They arrested him like 5 days later. So it took 9 days to build up a case, find evidence enough to build a case against him and arrest him and charge him for the crime.
Yeah.
And the reason being is because once you figure it out, you know, who your suspect is, there's always going to have to be things that have to be done in order to do them, right? Like, for instance, if somebody wanted to go and rob a bank, they would, in the middle of the night, you know, they would first have to leave their house. So if you start canvassing the area near their house and you see a vehicle like his or his vehicle leaving and taking off, that's some evidence that, hey, he wasn't home. So, all right, if he was, you know, you check certain things, right? And I just think that because of that, they didn't have his name until very late, until, like I said, December 20th, December 19th. Had he messaged somebody, they would have ran his name in the database. Like I said, had his name up there, had his vehicle. It didn't take much to get the warrant, right? You know, it was just the fact that he was a criminology student. He had a Reddit paperwork that they found online, and you know, they were able to determine that he had his phone off during the commission of the murders.
Yeah, unless, I mean, I guess the thing I think of with the following is if he thought that he could get rid of that trace, if he was, because I think he felt like he knows cloud forensics, and he knows, you know, kind of how that all works. And so I feel like he may have thought he was smarter than, smart enough to get rid of that trace evidence there. What do you think of all of this 50 terabytes of data they have?
Majority, it's probably surveillance. You know,
that's a lot of surveillance, though, man.
Well, they had to get some from Pullman, from Moscow, from a bunch of different places, and you know, it's not just like that time frame of 3 to whatever. You're looking at probably 24 hours before and 24 hours after.
Yeah, I think sometimes where we have different thoughts on it is the planning versus the not planning, right? Like how much planning went into it. Because I do feel like he was a little more impulsive than we think with this. I think there was an amount of planning involved, but I think there was a little bit more going on there impulsively with him that caused him to kind of act the way he did and make the mistakes that he did. His behaviors, you know, of driving around that area and then kind of, you know, just the choppiness of it, the mistakes that were made and the way it kind of played out. It just makes me feel like, there was planning involved that was a lot of thought, but I don't necessarily think he was just like perfect on his plan.
Oh yeah, I mean, what it means is he's human. Nobody's perfect, and there's going to be mistakes. There's got to be things that are going to happen. You know,
and he's not rational, right? He's not thinking, you know, rationally necessarily in this. You know, we try to kind of think of it from you know, we don't have that mindset of doing this, and so it's really hard. You know, we try to kind of relate it to what we would do or what common sense and who knows what was going on, right, with it in his mind in those moments. This is a good question here.
Yeah, and I'll ask that here in a sec. But what we do know is that, according to Dylan, she heard a man say, you know, it's okay, I'm here to help. You know, that's, if it was just merely to, you know, a science project, you know, for his criminology type of thing, you know, trying to understand criminals, I don't know if he's going to be saying those type of things. That comes from more of somebody who's enjoying what they're doing.
Agree.
You know what I'm saying? Marilyn, from Clarity, do you gentlemen think that there's any chance he'll plead guilty to avoid the DP? I don't think he's going to plead. I really don't. I think this is going to go to trial. And I think if he ends up being found guilty, given the fact of how many victims there were and just the heinousness and the ferocity in which these poor innocent victims' lives were taken, I think he'll most likely end up getting that too. What are your thoughts? Do you think? What are your thoughts on the question?
I think I could go either way on it. First of all, I think they have to offer him a plea deal, right? So I don't know if the defense will do that. It sounds to me like the evidence is pretty strong, and they're determined to get the maximum penalty here. And I think even some of the victims' families are that's their wishes as well. So I do think they're going to pursue that. In order to plea and make a deal, they have to agree to a deal, and I'm not sure if the defense will do that. Do I think they would consider it if it were offered? I do. Kind of, it depends though on the evidence. It's hard to say without knowing what they have against Bryan. If you're the defense team and you're looking at everything, they're going to have a lot better of a gauge on the shot that they have to get him acquitted. And if they're looking at that and they're saying this is a very small chance based off of the evidence, that might be appealing to them.
It could be. I don't think I see either side going for that. I don't think Bryan Kohberger would agree to one. And what does he got to lose, right? I mean, obviously his life. But I was listening to the Nancy Grace podcast, and I think they said in Idaho the average person who's on death row before executed stays on death row for over 27 years.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
You know what I mean? So this is, even if he's found guilty and given the death penalty, he's got appeals, he's got all these other things. Over 27 years. I think that's why, Ann Taylor said at one point, or maybe it was her assistant, something to the fact that we're going to be, at court in this for the next 20 years or so.
Yeah.
I guess it's true.
Yep.
Those things are true. So Texas Ranger says, wasn't AT asking about the footage after he left King Road? Yeah, that was in the I-95 and Palouse River Drive or Palouse Drive intersection that I suspect he never went down. There is another way of going to get to where he was at. But I think it has to do with that piece of information. Hillary Mansfield says, is he guilty or is he innocent? Well, right now he's innocent until proven guilty. I think he did it. I will say he did it. I can't say he's guilty because that's a conviction. He hasn't been tried yet. And so I'm open to any thoughts or evidence that comes out that would, answer some of the harder questions when it comes to this case. If you're trying to, say that he didn't do it, that I have yet to hear a reasonable explanation answering all of the factors and all the evidence that we're aware of. But so with that being said, I think he did it, but I'm not going to say he's guilty. What are your thoughts on it?
I agree. I think he's guilty based off of what we know, the evidence that we've seen, and I'm talking about the things that have been filed in the records and things on it, not necessarily rumors and things like that, but just based off of what I've seen that the courts have released. I lean guilty. Obviously he's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Public opinion is a little different. So based off of what I've seen, and I'm the same as you, Daniel, I would love for somebody to bring a valid explanation that makes sense, as to how all of these things connect to Bryan Kohberger and kind of, change my opinion. I haven't seen it yet.
This here comment from Hockey Guy 77 saying he was framed, I don't see it. And the reason being is you have to answer a few questions other than the fact, why has Bryan Kohberger been arrested? Because he was framed. Because that's the only question, I think that can possibly be answered there. You can't answer the other questions. Like for instance, when did they decide to frame Bryan Kohberger, and why did they decide to frame anybody to begin with? If your thoughts are, it's the University of Idaho, when did they decide that it was too long of an investigation that they needed to take care of it by just arresting anyone? How long do you think that would have taken? For the university to get fed up with how the investigation is going and tell or demand law enforcement just arrest anybody and frame anyone.
forever. I don't think they would do that. I don't
No.
think the university would even go there. I mean, when you say he was framed, it's, well, who's framing him?
Right. Well,
And
the reason why
is
I
it-
say this is there's a reason behind why I say it. I agree with you, never to, but I'm pretty sure it would be a lot longer than a few hours, because
Yeah.
that knife sheath was picked up by the Idaho State Police forensic team, and it was taken up north, I think it is, to their state lab. And at that place is where they found the DNA and entered it into CODIS. So that was done within the first couple of days, if not the first 24 hours, since, from when the murders or the bodies were discovered. If his DNA was entered into the database, CODIS, which is a national database, how are, let's just say it took 2 months, which is still ridiculous, but let's just say it took 2 months. The dean of the University of Idaho goes up to Chief Ryan and says, arrest anybody, just get this done. And they're like, all right, we choose the PhD student, over there, instead of this long list of suspects in our arrest database that we could probably easily get away with framing somebody, including the guy whose life was taken by SWAT in Pullman that everybody likes to bring up.
Right.
Those are easy, blamable persons. But no, they decide they want to go the hard way and blame a PhD student. Now, what are they going to do? Are they going to get his DNA and then go back into CODIS and change the sequence there and hope that nobody in a national database of law enforcement agencies are going to notice it?
Well, and the amount of people that would have to be involved in pulling that off.
It's
on
impossible.
top of it. It's a corrupt department, sure, but you're talking about multiple agencies, and with that theory of the dean, now you've got a corrupt college dean and a corrupt chief working together, and all of these things have to go together. Sure, explain it. I mean, break it down for me. Nobody ever kind of goes into those details and breaks down how he would have been framed.
Right, exactly. And if you're going to frame somebody, you're going to put touch DNA on the knife sheath. Wouldn't you put DNA like underneath the nails of a victim? I mean,
Good
now
point.
that would be huge, right? So I think that mere fact also says that he's not being framed.
Yeah, that's a great point.
There's no credibility into that claim. And if it was somebody that decided to commit the murders of these 4 individuals and blame it on Bryan Kohberger, well, that person would have a connection to the victims and to Bryan Kohberger in some form or fashion, right? And so it wouldn't be very difficult going through, Bryan's phone and all the stuff that he's, that's been going through forensically to see who his friends were and if there was any connection between his friends and the victims. Like there's a lot that goes behind an investigation that the public doesn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of people think, for whatever reason, that people, I guess law enforcement and prosecution and attorneys are stupid and they didn't think about doing those things. Yeah, it's beyond me.
Yep.
Let's see. I think I had a couple of more stars here. If you guys have any questions, put up the stars. That's funny. That's funny. I'm not gonna lie. I'm laughing at this one. That was good. That was a good one. Let's see. I know I have some started up here, but I want to go through the rest real quick. So, all right, let me go to these real fast. Oh man, I didn't. I already talked about him. So Psycho says, hey, chat, and hi, Daniel, and True Crime Time. I was bummed about the live that ended the other night. True Crime Time. I'm glad you got it back up. Were you able to get that live back up there, my man?
Yeah, I did. I had to edit a little piece out, but 90% of it got put back up. So I'll be talking about that kind of other section in my next live a little bit. I'll kind of catch everybody up on what that was and cover it again, just in a more careful way so that it doesn't get taken down. So
yeah, I'm shocked it was taken down for the reason that you told me.
Well, no, it was actually it PII info. So it was because I shared a screen that had too much information on it. And so once I cut that section out, it was good. So
Makes
sense.
sense.
I can go over that discussion again, but I'll do it more secure.
Yeah. And to me, I
learned my lesson. I learned my lesson.
Yeah, I was like, man, because you told me it was about when we're talking about Bryan Kohberger's weight loss and then current weight gain in jail.
That was the timestamp. Yeah. So when you get it, when your live comes down, they tell you where the content was that was in violation, and that's where it timestamped. But I thought to myself, it couldn't be that because we weren't saying anything out of line. And so the only thing I could think of was that other information. So I cut that out, and that seems to be what it was. So, So good to know. It was a good learning experience for next time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Shawnee T asks, does the Mad Greek restaurant have cameras? I don't know the answer to that. I think that it's on Main Street, right? Or it's pretty close to where that, well, I'll be honest, I have no idea where the Mad Greek is.
It's in the little downtown right around the way. It's near the Corner Club and all of those.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it on the same street that grub truck was on?
I don't know if it's the exact same street, but it's probably it's just a couple blocks right there where there's all kinds of stuff. It is right in there.
Well, I can say that in that area, me and the guys, when people were looking for the white Elantra and we were trying to figure out where, that video of, what did you tell Adam and all that other stuff, which we found. I think we were one of the few first ones that actually found where that was taken at. And all up in that area were cameras, all up in that area. So I'm sure there's cameras that maybe not I don't know if they're inside the building, but there sure is cameras outside of the building. Yeah. And I think they'd be able to notify or notice, BK. All right, so I got a few more stars here. Psycho asks, possibility of another attacker might be a thing, like maybe he wasn't alone. What do you think about him possibly not being alone?
I think he was alone. There hasn't been anything pointing to anything else. I think law enforcement would definitely have looked into that and done some sort of diligence there with trying to determine that. And again, I think there's evidence at the scene that can also answer that question. For example, the blood spatter evidence could potentially determine how many attackers there were. And so I think law enforcement has a pretty good sense that it was just him. They've stated that they believe it's just him. So in my opinion, I don't think it was multiple.
I highly doubt it was multiple. You have one person going in there and committing a crime where the only DNA he leaves behind is the DNA on the item that he brought in, right? The likelihood of two people doing that or three people doing that is much less than the likelihood of one person doing it.
Yeah, and you have an eyewitness.
And to be honest with you, it would have been. I found it. What's what I'm looking for? I'm not surprised that it was one person, but I was surprised that his DNA wasn't everywhere. To be honest with you, I was surprised there wasn't an eyebrow lash or an eyelash or eyebrow hair or piece of hair or sweat or something.
We don't know either. We don't know yet if they've found anything else or not.
Well, maybe. I mean, it depends. I mean, if you found sweat on the floor that matched up to Bryan Kohberger, I think that's more damning or just as damning as his DNA on the sheath.
Yeah, but depending on the testing and when it came back and all of those things, right? Or I'm thinking like the vehicle, maybe blood in the vehicle on the seatbelt strap or something unusual that we're not necessarily, they're not going to tell us.
Well, if you guys can keep this a secret, a little birdie had told me a long time ago that Bryan Kohberger allegedly had broken into, the WS school. What I had heard was that it was for, things that were like blood cleaner, luminol, some other stuff, to assist him with maybe perhaps the cleanup aspect of what you would have to do. And I wouldn't be surprised with this case. Howard Bloom heard from many of his sources, and he claims it from the FBI source and also from news media outlets, that Bryan Kohberger is being investigated for breaking into the WSU chem lab, and apparently it was either in the process of making or had made like a bomb or something. So I don't know. I had heard him breaking into the WSU thing, but it was for other reasons. I don't know. The guy that was on the J13, I think what everybody's calling it right now, that guy supposedly had explosives on him as well and a trigger.
Right.
So it wouldn't be the first time somebody who's trying to commit something heinous also, has something like explosives with him as well.
Yeah.
And
there are signs of that with this case. It's like a mass killing, right? So similar mentality there. I think the J13 situation was a combination of an assassination attempt and then also a mass shooting, and so kind of that same process of trying to injure or kill as many people as they can.
Yeah. Shawnee T asks, wonder if they got him frequenting the restaurant. According to the Mad Greek, they said no, but they have no obligation to tell the public the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's another one, though, I think they would have looked at early on.
Right. They would have checked his bank statements, credit cards, things of that nature to determine if he ever went there. But let's just say he did. Do you think, I would, if I owned the business, I'd probably deny it to the public. Obviously when it comes to trial and stuff like that, if he ended up, did attending there, and maybe perhaps that's where he met either Xana or was it Maddie that also worked there?
Yeah.
Maybe perhaps that's where he may have met one of those two. Then, I would maybe perhaps think that the business, in order to not have such negative publicity or people calling in and stuff like that, like they were, probably said, he was never here. There's no evidence of him ever being here, blah, blah, blah. Don't bother us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, this is actually a good question to kind of plug my next live that I'm going to do Sunday night. So I am going to actually talk a little bit about that topic of how I feel Bryan may have come to identifying the targets. And so that'll be a fun discussion. So
right.
I think when is it
going to happen?
I'm going to have that Sunday night. So if you want to join me, let me know. But
I may. I've had a long week.
See how you're feeling.
Yeah.
But because you can look at it a couple ways. What did he identify the victims first? Did he identify the house first? And so kind of trying to look at some of those different angles there will be an interesting discussion.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. John Doe says touch DNA is not even admissible in most courts. It's invisible to the naked eye and can be extremely easily be planted. But you got to ask yourself the question, like, why would somebody plant Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the knife sheath, and when would they do it? It comes back to the question, like, all right, we already found it. It's already entered into CODIS. I don't understand where they're getting his DNA from or why he's even a suspect on their radar at the time of the knife collection. Because that was collected the first day. Like it makes zero sense. And
the first part here is interesting, the touch DNA not being admissible. So are they not going to admit this DNA into this trial? I haven't heard that.
No. What he's saying is not admissible in some courts.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's what I'm saying. So
right.
if that's the point there, then why isn't the defense attacking that?
Oh, they are. Now? They're going to attack it, but
in the trial.
Yeah, and they will, and they're going to have their experts go up there and talk about how.
Yeah, but pre-trial is the time to get it not admitted into court. So,
no, I agree.
Why aren't we hearing that for over the last 2 years? Why aren't they bringing that up? So it tells me that DNA is very, very going to be admissible.
I have no doubt. And the reason why also, it's not the lone evidence in the case, right? Like, for instance, if that's all they had was touch DNA evidence, like, yeah, I'd probably say I mean, he could have gotten it from anywhere, but that's not the case here. There's a lot
Well,
more
it'd be-
evidence
yeah.
to add to it. It's the fact that his phone was off during the commission of the crime. It's the fact that a vehicle was seen outside of outside of the victim's home, driving in a suspicious manner, stopped driving during the time of the commission of the crime, and seen leaving at a high rate of speed when it is believed that the crime had been already committed. So that one would believe that the person operating that vehicle was either the killer or drove the killer there, which I doubt that there was anybody else. Well, anyways, you have all those factors that go into it. It's just the DNA isn't something that you can just is in this case the holy grail of the case. It's just one small piece of it, and it's corroborating, evidence too, because we don't know who's also a witness list. Who's to say that the DoorDash driver didn't see Bryan Kohberger's face, while he was out there, and didn't recognize him until after the fact. You know what I mean? And so I don't know, but we don't know all the evidence either. We only know a fraction of the evidence, and the other part of the defense is, they're only going to argue the stuff that they feel they have a chance to argue. They're not going to bring up, stuff that's going to make their client look bad in pre-trial hearings. You know what I mean? So right now at this point of the phase or whatever, this phase of what would be his trial and completion, it's not time for the prosecution to actually talk about what they really do have.
Right.
But good stuff, John Doe. Let's see. Just to go back to kind of like what we were talking about earlier, with Kohberger and perhaps, the potential move to Boise. I don't think it's going to work in his favor, man. I know why they want to move it out there, but how long do you think it could maybe? Well, I'm not sure if you even know how long it would postpone the trial if something like this happened. Because I'm not really familiar with like hearings and stuff. Like when I was in law enforcement, there was only one trial that I was supposed to testify in. And I don't think it'll delay it. It sounds like the infrastructure is there in the area based off of what the defense filing was explaining. They were kind of arguing that it's a good venue to do this, and they were talking about the way it's laid out, and it would be easy to travel into and in out. So I think it'll probably be a pretty smooth. I don't think the judge wants to delay this anymore either. In those last couple of hearings, you could sense that he was ready to kind of start setting some deadlines, and I think the defense would love it, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think that date's going to stay, whether they move it or not. Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that one. I don't think they're going to be able to get that out. All right, so I have a few more of these stars that I came up with. So let me pull these up real quick. We already talked about that one. All right, here's a good one. Here's one from Open Your Peeper. Says, what are your thoughts about confidential informants? What are your thoughts about that?
Confidential informants?
Let's put it this way. In Howard Bloom's book, he states that at one point he got information from a couple of grand jurors that had reached out, and they spoke about potential informants or something of that nature. And that Steve went on the lookout to try to find this person. And then when they were about to talk to this person, the FBI stepped in and said, hey, you can't, because that person called the tip line.
Well, I think that there's quite a few people that they talk to that are considered informants, and they could be character witnesses. They could also have more detailed information. They could have had an experience as well.
There's an important detail that it was called in to the FBI tip line.
Right.
So
so this could have been somebody who suspected it was that person, right? Maybe they knew Bryan and they knew what he drove, and they had this interaction with him that was unusual, something that triggered them to think, yeah, maybe you guys should look into this guy. I'm not sure, I'm kind of like fourth down the line here on the information here, but as far as a confidential informant, this could be, it could be a number of things. It could be, like I said, it could be character witnesses. It could be somebody who has a specific piece of information. It could be the DoorDash driver, to your point. So,
well, I think we can break it down a little bit and try to figure it out. So this person wasn't in the probable cause affidavit, right? And I think that if there was a confidential informant that gave up Bryan Kohberger and said that's the person you're looking for, they would probably be in the probable cause affidavit. And so, to me, that means this confidential informant called the tip line after his arrest. Okay, so it'd be somebody who isn't very, I guess it would break it down to what maybe one of his classmates, and the way he was acting or whatever the case may have been. Maybe they had called in, but it would have to be something much closer to the case than just somebody in a school or maybe somebody that hung out with him, unless he said something to them, right? Unless he told his friends like, oh man, those kids got what they deserve or something stupid like that. You know what I mean? That might be something. Or perhaps, there's been a lot of rumors.
It could be an eyewitness, right?
Well, what do we know? We know that I think in the PCA it says that Bryan Kohberger was seen cleaning out his car extensively, right? But does it say who saw him? I don't think
that was in. Yeah, we don't know if it was a camera or a person. But what would somebody saying I saw him cleaning out his car? I mean, yeah, sure, that could kind of support.
Well, maybe they know a little bit more. Let's think about it a little bit more. They would have to know a little bit more. Maybe somebody's not also noticed other behaviors that weren't, I don't know, normal.
Right.
Especially if they, it'd probably have to be somebody that knew his normal behaviors. Maybe, we've heard some rumors about some family members speaking about things. I think that's what we're looking at.
It could be a family member.
I think that's what it is. That's my opinion. I'm just speculating. I haven't been told anything. I don't know anything. But I wouldn't be surprised once, those witness lists comes across or whatever the case may be, if there's a family member there.
Yeah, I agree. I've talked a little bit about even his dad and what he may have witnessed when he was in town with Bryan, and they were kind of, he came and met him. I don't know what their interactions were, if he went to Bryan's apartment before they hit the road or what, but the dad is interesting to me. That's a long drive. And I do feel like they were very in sync on that drive back. And his dad seemed very protective of Bryan in those traffic stops, those body cams that we saw, where he's almost speaking for Bryan and kind of jumps right in between the police officer and Bryan in both occasions, and that's, usually the police officer is interacting with the driver, right? And they're more focused on the driver, and the passenger is kind of secondary. So that was unusual that they were very much in sync. They brought up the same exact conversation with both officers. It just felt very not necessarily scripted, but I sensed that maybe his dad, there was something there. His dad was kind of protecting him. And so I wonder what he may have seen or heard or saw, even, when they were, when he went and met him there, and then based off of how he was acting. Could also be, once he got back to Pennsylvania, right?
Well, I think there's some more clues to this too.
Yeah.
Didn't the family come out with a statement saying that they had fully cooperated with law enforcement? I believe that was the exact thing that was said, in their statements. So I just feel like it's probably going to be one of them. I mean, police didn't get eyes on him until, 24th or so. I think that somebody must have told him that he was washing the car extensively. I mean, if he was doing it in his front yard or in his garage, who else is going to see that?
Yeah.
And what camera is going to catch that?
Yeah. Well, I think you and I talked about the possibility that he had that car in there on December. I think they arrived on December 16th.
Yeah.
And that's maybe not arrived, but that's the last note about the Whitey Elantra being seen is December 16th in all of the documents that have been released. And so I'm wondering if he was keeping it in the garage.
Yeah, exactly. And if it was in the garage, who could have seen him cleaning it extensively with bleach?
Yeah.
Unless it's somebody inside of that building.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it had to have been. Hillary says, for an absolute horrific crime, why just touch DNA? What is your thought on that? And then I'll give my response.
Well, I think precautionary measures, right? I think Bryan covered his body, wore gloves. And so that's why there's going to be a limited amount of DNA. Now, that's what we've heard about. We still don't know if there's been anything else found. It's possible, maybe not. But I think that would be why there would be limited DNA, is because of the measures he took to cover his body. He would have been aware that he didn't want to leave any traces. Now, what I'm assuming Hillary means here when she says a horrific crime is the execution of the crime being kind of chaotic in this attack, right? This brutal attack. And keep in mind that, the size that Bryan is and the weapon that Bryan was using, the size of the victims, they would not have had a chance. And we've talked about them fighting back, and this wasn't a fight back. This would have been defensive wounds, and maybe they were attempting to fight back, but these attacks would have been very easy for Bryan to do without the victims necessarily being able to scratch him or do anything like that. This was a blitz type of attack. This was very fast. And that's why I think, there's a limited amount there. I don't, if you kind of play it out in your mind and it's easy to have these images, like what you see in movies, but the victims would have been immobilized really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. But for me, to answer this question about why they're, just touch DNA, comes to the question of means, or comes to the triangle of, law enforcement. You have means, opportunity, motive. Means meaning, the ability to complete this task. And it's not just the ability to stab somebody or take their lives. It's also the ability to do that with also knowing enough laws and rules and how to get away with things, to have only left touch DNA on a sheath that was left behind probably by accident. Exactly. So when you see the fact that it was just touch DNA behind, you can kind of rule out some things, right? You can rule out the fact that it wasn't somebody who was intoxicated with alcohol, because a person intoxicated with alcohol will sweat profusively. And if they were going through a roid rage incident, driving around 3 times before you make a quiet, silent entry isn't usually a symptom of roid rage. You're going to hear somebody mad out of their mind. They're going to stop and park once, especially if he was willing to fight, one of the victims at a party in front of hundreds of people or tens of hundreds of people, or I don't know, 50, 60, 80, however many people were there. He didn't care at that moment. He was willing to go and fight. He's on roids. And now he goes silent and does this real quiet thing. It doesn't make any sense. So, somebody had to have committed this crime and had to have been able to do this with the ability to only leave touch DNA on an item they accidentally left behind. That tells me that they probably have some experience in forensics. They understand how not to leave their DNA at a crime scene, how not to take DNA or a crime scene with them. Somebody who has experience or is highly educated in those fields, which Bryan Kohberger is.
Yeah, another clue that comes from that is I also think it means he purchased the knife fairly recently before the murders happened, not necessarily had it for years before, right? Because there would have been a lot more DNA, most likely, on the knife sheath had it been handled constantly and were something that it was just in his collection. I think that the knife was purchased in the months leading up to it, probably within 6 months.
According to news articles that I read, I think it was like April of 2022. So it was right around the time he had that interview with the chief of Pullman Police Department about his intern position. That was also in April of 2022. Now we know he had applied in the fall, so that tells me he probably didn't get the job in the spring, which probably tells me also that maybe that's one of the triggering, points. Is like,
Maybe
these guys don't understand who I am. I'm one of two people that have ever been recommended by my professor to the PhD program. I've graduated with a master's degree from DeSales University, and these guys are going to tell me I'm not good enough.
Possibly, yeah.
Wow.
The one thing that is interesting, there is a Amazon warrant that was filed in, I think it was July or might have been September, and it was after the FBI forensic, the guy who analyzes all of the financial records. He's kind of the expert on that. But they continued another Amazon filing, and it was a more narrow period of time that they were asking for records. It was March 1st to March 10th. And then I think there was another window in there. It might have been September or, kind of window of a time period. So I wonder if they may have narrowed down after some more analysis and gotten the records that they were looking for then.
It could be. It could be. I mean, again, there's so much that they probably found and know since this arrest that hasn't been public to us.
That's why, and that's why we're all so interested in this case. Is there's just so many unanswered questions, and trying to understand.
Yeah, for us there is, but law enforcement and prosecution, they know the answers to a lot of these questions, and it seems to me that they're all fairly confident, especially those that have talked to the victims' family members.
Yeah,
that there's a lot more evidence that they have against them that we're aware of.
And I'm sure some of the stuff that we think we're aware of, I'm sure there's some misinformation mixed in here. You know what I mean? With everything that's out there, it's hard. That's the challenge. You have to really be careful with what you believe or read, because it can get twisted around really easily.
Oh, 100%. Sirius comes in with a question saying, why would Bryan Kohberger not come forward and tell LE that he drove a white Elantra and offer up his alibi at that time when they were asking? Well, obviously, and the obvious answer would be because he was committing the crime. That's the only thing, the only reason why he wouldn't do it, because he was committing the crime. I mean, I guess if he didn't want to bring attention to himself, if oh man, I drove a car like that, I was out and about that night, my phone was off, and it just so happened all those things happen at that time, and then find out
somehow
later,
my
DNA gets there too. Yeah.
Don't forget about that part.
Yeah. No.
It's actually very telling though. Because remember, Bryan was very in tune with what was happening near WSU when he was hundreds of miles away with his dad on the road. They knew exactly what was happening, with that case. So he was, his neighbors that he spoke to said he was talking about this case all the time. So he was aware of it. You can't say, well, hey, I don't think he's aware of the case, and so he just was oblivious to it. He didn't come forward. He was aware. And so this is somebody who had interest in working in law enforcement, who worked as a security guard. He's the perfect type of person that you would expect to come forward and say, hey, yeah, I drive a white car. I was out that night, but here's where I was. Let's look into this and, prove it. So,
apparently his statement was, when he was asked if he had heard about the murders, was, of course, just what I've read in the newspapers, or just what I've read in the papers. This guy's an, forensic cloud and, technological stuff. You think he's reading newspapers? Or you think he's getting a lot of his media online?
Oh yeah, he's getting it online and his phone and
right. So why would he say something so cliche like just what I've seen in the papers?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious about that. It's just that seemed odd.
Yeah.
And I would have been like, yeah, just what I've seen on the news or heard on my phone or whatever. But read in the papers was interesting. All right. So, warning label asks you, how do you feel about ego depletion escalating to threatened egotism theory?
Yeah.
No, I don't know if you're a psychologist or not, but
no, I do have some videos on some of this, but and that's a whole, I think, another video in itself. But so ego depletion, just kind of think of it as what I had mentioned before, is just Bryan kind of having this, internal struggle with these urges and committing this crime, and the psychology behind it, that goes into that. But eventually, you kind of have your good ego and your bad ego, right? Think of it that way, kind of competing with each other. So knowing what's right, but you have these urges, to do this other thing. And then eventually you have this moment of weakness where you kind of give into that urge. And I do think that, kind of that impulsiveness that I was talking about with Bryan, and why he would have acted in the manner that he did and made some of these mistakes, being his mental state and him kind of, having this breakdown. And so as far as the threatened theory, that kind of goes into a little bit more. I'm going to do a follow-up on that, and because I was actually reading a little bit about that, but that's kind of another layer to that, and kind of, why he would have acted out towards the people that he did, and had these kind of interactions with his professor, for example, right? Having these problems with authority and things like that, because it can kind of go into, kind of this personality thing where kind of ties together.
Yeah,
that's a complicated one. That's a good question, but that's a whole nother video.
No, I hear you. Yeah, I took psychology for a semester in junior college, so I'm right in there, brother. I'm right in there.
You're like, I got it. That makes sense.
If you don't know what that's from Jingle All the Way. In fact, I was telling a coworker of mine that no, you know what? It was somebody that emailed me. I was telling him, I was like, some of these takes that I hear remind me of a scene in Jingle All the Way. Where, are you familiar with the movie?
Oh yeah.
So the part where he's trying to go into the toy store and he's got 2 minutes, and this is when he meets Sinbad, and Sinbad tells him, this is all like a toy cartel thing. And then he goes, I went to junior college for a semester and I took psychology, so I know what I'm talking about. That reminds me of some of the stuff that I hear online. It's funny.
Yeah. For me, part of what fascinates me about cases like this is kind of the psychology behind it. Not necessarily diagnosing somebody, but just kind of trying to understand what they were thinking, and maybe what caused them to act in the way they did. In this case in particular, just the irrationality that took place mixed with the planning, and is very interesting to me. And so I that's just one of the things that I'm into, and is trying to kind of understand that side of it. And, not so much how it happened, but, kind of the why it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot of people that go out there. There's what was it, a series, Monster Hunter or something like that, where it was a group of FBI agents that went and talked to a lot of different types of serial killers throughout the world while they're on death row or whatever the case may be, and they would try to get information and understand the mind of somebody who was capable of these type of things, because there's I guess something to learn from. That way you can also apply it to catching the next guy, because let's be honest, this case here probably has shown a lot of people how to get away with a crime, what not to do. First and foremost, what did he do that made him get away with like some of the things that you wouldn't have understood, which is, how did he not get the DNA in the car, which obviously he's probably changed his clothes before he went in. It's not that difficult. His the vehicle coming out with nothing, his apartment, all those other things, his phone. People are going to be like, oh, well, maybe I need to keep my phone at home. Those type of things. So in a way, he also drove like an hour around to get back to Pullman to elude the investigation. In a way, he's kind of put out a little bit of a blueprint, and it's kind of scary, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's see. I got a few more questions here. If you guys want me to answer and put a couple stars before him so I can see them. Let's see. is Howard, as Bloom wrote in his book about grand jurors saying that this, that, or the thing, isn't that the same sort of naughty thing that affects the case? I mean, it affects the possible jury pool. And I think that's the only thing that it'll affect. It won't affect any real aspect of the case. But yeah, if that's coming out and that's being spread through Moscow, it's going to be an issue. It's going to be an issue. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an issue, and obviously very concerning if a grand jury member would be speaking out about the case. I would hope that. Yeah. So was this? I mean, was this a random grand juror? I'm not. I haven't validated the information. I know Howard Bloom is a reliable source, but I don't know. I'd have to see what was said. It's kind of shocking to me, and it makes me feel like there would be some sort of an investigation taking place if that were the case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they would just turn their eye the other way, knowing that the grand jurors on this case are speaking out. The defense would be all over that.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. Elizabeth says, didn't BK's parents have to go in front of a grand jury, or was that a rumor as well? No, they did. They had to go and testify on the Dana Smithers murder as well. What was brought up in there or what came to light, I have no idea. I have not been able to figure that out yet. I have one person that's kind of close to that, to somebody there, but they have not really answered my questions to the point where I can understand why they were there.
And I think this is another one you and I disagree on, Daniel, because I think he was summoned for this case. I understand that, typically people are summoned in the jurisdiction where they're at, but with this case, the profile of it, there are situations where they will summon people and question them, and then they can share the questioning, with the other courts. And I personally think that they summoned to the parents to talk to them about the Moscow case.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the actual intention of them doing it, but it was in the Dana Smithers case, because I believe it was her sister that I didn't get word from directly, but I know somebody who knows, I think her sister, who's talked a little bit about what that was, but they have not answered my question as far as what were they asked? What were they really for there, or whatever?
Maybe as simple as just validating an alibi or, something.
Well, apparently they already had his alibi before he even went up there. It was that he wasn't there when it happened. I think he was already in Moscow. John Doe says, is it super suspicious for someone to wash their car after a country road trip? No, not at all. What's super suspicious is if he parked it into his garage and washed it a few times inside of his garage, and then continued to wear latex gloves around the house. That's the suspicious part. It's one thing to go out there and just wash it. It's another thing to bleach it in the garage multiple times.
Well, and it's a little more suspicious when your DNA is found at the crime scene, when your car's on camera, when your cell phone's pinging there, when you don't have an alibi, when you have all of these things. Is that a little suspicious? Sure. Is it suspicious in any other situation? Not necessarily, but considering that he's a murder suspect, him cleaning out his car is relevant. There's relevance there. It may be nothing. He may have just been cleaning his car out, but there is relevance of the fact that he was cleaning, right? If they were to find a cleaning agent of, or bleach or something in his car, that would be worth pointing out to in the trial. The prosecution would want to add that to the rest of the evidence that they have.
Yeah, no, 100%. Kelly asked the question. I'm going to let you answer this one first, but what approach do you think the defense is going to take? Seems like they have a really tough job ahead of them. So play a little bit of devil's advocate. What do you think the prosecution's best foot forward would be?
I think actually similar to the Karen Reed approach. I think they're going to try to create not necessarily a conspiracy theory defense, but I think casting doubt on the integrity of the investigation is going to be their best bet. I don't think they have an alibi. At least it doesn't sound like it, unless they're hiding this, and we'll be all shocked, and so without an alibi, I don't see any other angles other than targeting the evidence and the the way that they identified Bryan, all of these things that they're kind of setting the stage for pre-trial, that they're going after, even this change of venue situation, you know, anything that they can do to claim his rights were violated, to claim that law enforcement, you know, was malicious in attaining, you know, in putting together the PCA, anything they can do to kind of cast doubt is their best bet.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, that's their goal is to cast the doubt. You know, to me, I think it's going to be similar to like Karen Reed, where they were throwing things out there as far as like, you know, the dog bit him and this happened, or this person beat him up, or this kid beat him up, or whatever the case may have been. You know, they're going to throw mud on the wall to see what sticks. I think they're going to bring up, you know, Jack DeCore and his relationship status with Kaylee and try to point jurors into that direction. They're probably going to bring up, if there really was a fight at Sigma Chi, you know, that situation, and just kind of say that, look, because the biggest question in this case has always been motive. You know, these guys here, you know, potentially have more motive than what Bryan Kohberger does. But when you actually look at the evidence and you realize that you don't hear the sound of emotion coming from the killer, you know, you're not hearing a love-struck kid yelling, "I hate you," or whatever. "How could you do this?" Whatever the case may have been. If he was angered enough to the point to kill 3 other people to get to 1, you know, and or if it was a drunken, roid-raged frat fraternity guy. I mean, the way the entry happened, driving around 3 times, doesn't make sense. Those dots don't connect. They don't fit together.
Don't forget the cartel hit, and then Emma Bailey and her boyfriend. Don't forget them either.
Yeah.
There's all these different theories, right? Who else it could be?
Well,
I'm not saying they're going to bring those up. I'm just joking. I'm just saying those.
No,
you know, all of these other kind of scenarios. You know.
No, well, they definitely could.
Well, they could cast out, right? More suspects. It could cast out.
But it's going to be difficult to try to say that these guys were in some sort of drug-related incident and that they were in trouble with drugs when their toxology reports came back 100% clean.
I mean, if you think about the knife sheath and the DNA, let's say they just focus on that. You know, how do you dispute that? Well, you either get it inadmissible, but let's say that doesn't happen, and you have to now come up with an answer for that. Well, you could say, oh, he sold it to somebody, right? Well, he sold it to some other guy, and then he happened to touch it at the store. You know, all of those scenarios. That's a long shot if you're going to go with that. That's not a very strong argument. So. I'm not quite sure how you could explain that one away with that being there. So to me, it makes me lean toward the processing of the DNA and you know, kind of the corruption angle.
Yeah. Heather says Dana Smith's sister and family have been adamant that BK is not involved in Xana's passing.
Yeah, right. I agree.
I don't think we ever said that was the case. What we said was that his parents were brought in for grand jury. Yeah. It was very well publicized. I mean, there's video of images of them walking into the court, I think separately. They asked them to speak separately, which is another thing that's kind of weird, right? 2
different days. Two different days. They're going to interview them individually for sure, because they don't want them tainting each other's testimony. But we don't know what they were asking them.
Yeah. No, we don't know. I honestly don't know. I haven't heard anything. I just heard that he had nothing to do with it.
But just to clarify with the Dana Smithers, I don't necessarily think it just, to me, it doesn't fit. The method of the crime is different.
So DB asks, also a Bloom question: did Bloom see the autopsies? I don't think he saw the autopsies. I don't think he did. I didn't ask him that, but I don't think he did. Just personally, my thoughts are, I don't think he did.
How would he? I mean, I just don't see how he would get access to that. You know.
Yeah. I don't either. Let's see. You see, John Douglas, it's really desperate to say somebody washing their cars. See, but that's the thing. You're only looking at it from one side. It's like me saying, man, somebody sees it really weird that they would go out and look at the stars without asking or not adding the contents of 20-degree weather, icy road conditions, and overcast. So, like, you know, there's more context to it. It's not just he was washing his car. It was multiple times that he was cleaning out his car with bleach, you know, to the point where it's possible that his sisters and or family members found it suspicious and odd the amount of times that he was doing it. So there's probably a lot of other things that were going on.
Well, it's
that made
also
him feel
not
that way.
it's also not unusual to purchase a K-bar knife on Amazon.
No, it's not.
Had he just done that, that's a different story, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's true. I mean, and the thing is, it's kind of like with everybody that everybody says something like, oh, you know, there's 22,000 white Elantras in the air, which is not true. It's not 22,000 white Elantras. There's 22,000 vehicles in the somewhat of the area that could be whitish or be conceived to be white, and also a Honda Elantra-like vehicle that they had to cross out. They had to cross out the ones that weren't exactly the model that they were looking for, too. But when you break it down, like, all right, there's so many cars. Well, how many of those cars are owned by 6 foot, 200-pound males? You know, of those 6 foot, 200-pound males that own a white Elantra in that area, how many were out that night at 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning? And out of those that are remaining, how many of those people had Bryan Kohberger's DNA in the car?
Right.
You know, the
Didn't
likelihood
have an
chances-
alibi.
Yeah.
But again, the car washing thing, it's not evidence of a crime. That's just kind of something that you look at when you're trying to come to a common sense conclusion, looking at all of the evidence together.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that's going to make or break your decision, but it just adds to and supports how he was acting afterward. And it depends on cleaning out the car. Somebody just saying, yeah, I saw Bryan cleaning out his car, that's not going to really matter. But if there's, say, a car wash with a camera and it shows him thoroughly cleaning out his car and scrubbing everything shortly after the murders happened, again, that's relevant in telling the story about the overall case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Annie says, Latah County statistics for deaths in 2022, age group, red rums, no one substance, other named some chemical drug, could have been prescribed, named by drug class, please. I think you're trying to come out with like meth. Is that what you're trying to say? Some kind of like making of meth or whatever. I don't think there was no drugs in their system. There was no drugs in the system. So John Doe goes again one more time saying, you're attacking a straw man. BK never claimed to be stargazing at the time of the murder. Exactly. No, I know.
Never said he was, yeah.
He said that he had gone out in other times in November as well. And on these other trips in November, he took pictures of said stars and scenery and, went on hikes, and he had his phone trailing him on those days. Just that night, it's different.
Yeah, we all know, though, that what they're claiming is he was out doing something else, hiking and being in nature. That's what they're saying he likes to do. And it was described as stargazing at one point, and so that gets latched onto by people who kind of want to defend Bryan, right? And say, oh, you're saying he was out stargazing and never said that. It's like, no, nobody's saying he was out there stargazing. That's not the point,
Right. So Annie asks, the statistics for 2022 just asking for real government document to be recited, not Howard Bloom's source. I don't understand how many people whose lives were taken in 2022. Is that what you're asking? Murder. Let me see. I'll answer. 2022. All right. FBI releases the 2022 crime national statistics. There's a lot of words. It decreased by 1.7% compared to 2021. On Latah County alone, I don't know, my man. That's a lot of work. But I don't know. I thought it had been a while since they had a murder. Wasn't it like 7 years or something like that? I believe that was the amount of time. It'd been like 7 years prior to that there'd been murder, and I don't know how many years before that they had something that was unsolved.
It had been a while, yeah.
So, a relatively safe place, I guess, up until Bryan Kohberger's arrival. Doesn't mean he did anything. It's just things started going crazy once he arrived. Girls started getting followed. Cameras were secretly, or not secretly installed, but were installed, but secretly watched from him.
Yeah.
There was students that complained about his behavior. He got into it with his WSU teacher. He lost his teaching assistant job and twice was denied to become an intern police officer, probably because of his background check and his behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But so do you got any finals words, man? We're getting kind of long in the tooth here. You got anything else you want to talk about or say before we let everybody go?
No, always fun to be here. Always enjoy it, and appreciate the invite. And hopefully I can come back another time soon, and hopefully I can have you on my channel.
Yeah, for sure, man. Anytime. I think the next time I want to do like maybe not so much a Bryan Kohberger case. You're into paranormal stuff?
I like it. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I got some videos and some topics on some UFOs and ETs, including the fact that I think there may be I've heard that could be a discovery. We'll see. You have to tune in for that. But everybody, please go and follow True Crime Time. His channel is in the description. Make sure you go give him a like and a subscribe and everything. Let him know that you came from the Drunk Turkey Show. Please hit the like and subscribe for this channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you, Heather, for your 16-month membership. I also want to say thank you to 49er Girl, who before the show had her, I want to say it was like 11th or something like that month, or maybe it was 12th month membership as well. Well, guys, I'll be back sometime this weekend to do a members only show. I hope to see you guys there. Until next time, we'll see you later. Peace.